Welcome to Season 2 of the 007 Files. My name's David Leigh, and as usual, I'm joined by my co-hosts. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
I'm Bill Koenig with the Spy Command, and looking forward to our second season.
I am Javi Trujillo, contributor to the James Bond dossier and co-host here on the 007 Files, and I too am looking forward to getting into Season 2. We have a lot of good shows coming up this year.
Yep, I think we've got a ton of ideas, and we just need to put it all into action. We're starting off big because you two have done a great interview. Would you like to just mention what we're going to follow up with?
Well, for our debut episode here, Javi and I interviewed Neil Bulk. He is a freelance album producer, editor. He does a lot of work for La La Land Records, including its now 9 Bond albums, most of them expanded, a lot of music that had not been heard before. It was a really good discussion, and we got into a lot of the mechanics, and people tend to view things as really planned out on those releases. It turns out, I mean, you can judge for yourself in the interview. There's less planning than you might think, but it was a great discussion.
I thought it was really insightful, and I enjoyed talking to Neil. He's really, as you're going to hear, he's really easy to talk with and has a lot of great insights and just a pleasant guy to talk to. And he's, given us so much, helped give us so much great Bond music in physical media. So it was a real pleasure to talk to him. And now I'm just checking my tracking number every couple of hours to see if my CD is moved from Los Angeles still.
Okay, you two are keen, aren't you?
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention something briefly that Ian Fleming Publications have announced their plans for 2025. And, there's the 00 trilogy, and there's a new Q murder mystery series or something like that. And there is a new edition of Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, and there are some audiobooks. But there is one thing that I think really caught our eye, which is a new book, which is Talk of the Devil, The Collected Writings of Ian Fleming, which is due just before the anniversary of his birthday. And this is a book really that I've been waiting to come out for a few years, since I realized that there was a lot of writing that he'd done that hadn't been collected together, or at least not in an easily accessible book. So what do you two think about this?
Well, Fleming, I'm more attuned to this than some fans. Was an accomplished journalist.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is a chance to see some of what he did, kind of his day job, I guess, because, for example, the book Thrilling Cities originated as a project he did for the Sunday Times, I believe, where he went to all these cities, and he had a very keen eye for observation. I think, though, that his American publishers didn't care for his observations about New York City. So they weren't a series of fluff pieces by any means. And I believe, if I remember the story correctly, he did the short story 007 in New York basically to kind of pacify his American publisher.
Yeah, that's correct. So I think what's interesting is that it says that there's stuff from wartime, and which presumably is when he was working in intelligence. So I don't know what's going to be in there.
Yeah, it's a really exciting prospect to see some of this. The email they sent out that links to the website said it's the very first trade edition of the collected nonfiction writings encompassing reviews from the Times, Second World War documents, travel journalism, correspondence with Raymond Chandler, and much more, featuring newly unearthed articles that have not been available for over half a century. So that's just, really intriguing, especially because we keep getting these little trickles, like in the Horowitz books of like Fleming manuscripts. So it's obviously he's not writing anything. So it's always nice when we get these lost gems that come out. And that was an immediate pre-order for me for the UK edition. I'm not going to wait for the US because for some reason we get way, way left behind on everything when it gets published. So it's worth the shipping and taxes to get it.
That's how we used to feel in the UK, waiting for American films to come over to the UK, because they were often months later than they released in the States. So it's payback.
That's fair. And the Chitty Chitty Bang Bang 60th anniversary edition also caught my eye, and I pre-ordered that too. So I don't have it on my bookshelf at all. And it's got the original John Burningham illustrations, who apparently is, they're publishing it on April 23rd to coincide with his birthday. It comes with an exclusive limited edition art print. So I was like, why not?
I think when all these come out, we're going to talk about them in a bit more depth once we've got them and had a chance to flick through the pages, and we've got something solid to talk about. But was there anything else that you wanted to talk about?
Well, I am in the final stages of testing for James Bond for Bond 26, but I kind of want to keep a lid on that because I don't want to jinx it. I haven't made the bookies list yet, but, fingers crossed.
I'm sure we can drop some subtle hints.
On the Spy Command on Saturday, February 1st, I'm coming out with a post about the 40th anniversary of View to a Kill, and on March 1st, I'll have 30th anniversary of GoldenEye. Haven't attacked Thunderbolt yet. I'm thinking that's going to merit more attention and more work.
I think that's going to be my focus of anniversaries this year. I love Thunderbolt. I love that film. Yeah. Okay, well, great talking to you, and, well, let the drums roll for your interview.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second season debut of the 007 Files. And we are starting off our second season by talking to Neil S. Bulk, producer at La La Land Records. He has been making, it's up to 9 now, albums of James Bond scores, and many of which have music that had not been heard before. And Neil graciously agreed to this interview. And Javi, do you have any thoughts before I turn it over to Neil?
I'm just really excited to talk to him. I've got his name on more CDs and vinyl in my collection than probably artists, because he's been so prolific in getting, movie scores out there for us to listen to. So I'm extremely excited to talk to him and hear what he has to say.
Okay, and Neil, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, my name's Neil Bulk, and I'm a freelance. Something to correct you on there. I'm a freelance producer, editor, and I work with a variety of labels. There's La La Land Records, but there's also Entrada. I work with Quartet Records, Perez Saraband, and I've even done some work for Disney for some of their streaming albums. So it's like I'm not exclusive. If you want to hire me, I'm happy to work with you.
That was going to be one of my questions, just because I've seen your name on obviously the La La Land records, but I've got, various Mondo vinyls and Star Trek things that have your name on it. And I know those are all different companies. So I was curious what your actual position or title was, or if you were exclusive to anyone.
No, just my wife.
Well, let's start. We'll start at the beginning. That old cliche. How did this Bond project get started? As we said, it's up to 9 now with the release of the expanded score of License to Kill.
Yeah, it's a good question, and I'm not really sure. We did Die Another Day in 2017, and that came about because I think in terms of album releases, it's actually one of the easier ones to do behind the scenes. It was that original album was on Warner Brothers Records, which meant we were dealing with Warner Music, which was, in terms of dealing with giant entities, relatively easy for us. So we were like, okay, so it's MGM, Warner Records, let's do this, and that came out and was terrific, and then I got the email a couple months later after it came out. It was like, well, we're going to do World Is Not Enough next. And I went, oh, okay. And that was on MCA Records, which meant we were dealing with another large corporation, in this case, Universal Music. So we did that, and that worked out well. And it was, I think I've mentioned this elsewhere, and I'll mention it here. Every time I do any project, whether it's James Bond or Star Trek or anything like that. Once that one is done, I'm like, okay, that's it. That was nice to work on a James Bond. I don't know if there will ever be any more. So when Die Another Day came out, I was like, well, that's great. We did one. Hooray. I didn't expect World Is Not Enough. And so when it came about, I was like, oh, delightful. Let's do it. And then there was a little bit of a break, and we wound up doing Tomorrow Never Dies. By the way, in between World Is Not Enough and Tomorrow Never Dies, I worked with David Arnold on Stargate, which we also did on La La Land, which was another one I never expected. And it's like, oh, we're doing this. I went, okay, great, wonderful. And then it was in the middle of Tomorrow Never Dies where I reached out to MGM and said, hey, I'm doing the research on these other titles. Are they possible? And I didn't really hear anything until after Tomorrow Never Dies came out. A few months later, I got an email that said, hey, Octopussy and Live and Let Die are having anniversaries this year. Are you guys interested in putting them out? I was like within 5 seconds, I'd called MV Gerhardt of La La Land Records. I was like, yeah, we want to do these, right? And he said, this is a family show, so I won't repeat what he said, but it was something, yeah. And so yeah, that's how it happened.
I remember there being a lot of fan expectations with those releases coming out that you mentioned, because it's like we had Die Another Day, which was just off the charts amazing to listen to and hear those tracks that weren't available before. And I love so much of Arnold's work for the series. And then at pretty much the exact same time, we got The World Is Not Enough. So I think the community kind of assumed that the very next year, at the very same time, we'd be getting Tomorrow Never Dies. And that didn't happen. I remember there being a lot of online frustration that you had to deal with because there wasn't a Tomorrow Never Dies pre-order. And I think people at that point were like, oh, they're going in reverse order, and assuming that we would get Tomorrow Never Dies and then GoldenEye the following year. And that hasn't proved to be the case at all. So thank you for letting us in on that.
Yeah, no, there's no master plan. There's no, well, this is what we're going to do. I mean, we would love to have it all mapped out, but things just don't work out that way. Elements, release dates, it's all sort of like we knew we had to get Moonraker out last year. We knew that was going to be a big release, and we had to get that out. And Golden, so we knew, we had to get things done. But there's no like, oh, they're doing this, so they must absolutely be doing this. It's like, no, it doesn't work that way at all. So it's not as well structured as they would like, I guess.
What are the technical challenges to bring these to life? Because I mean, if you look at Spectre, next to the last Bond movie, that was over a decade ago that it came out. And we're talking about, 20, 30, in Goldfinger's case, 60-year-old soundtracks. Like, the original recordings are decades and decades old. Like, what obstacles do you guys face for that?
It can be a challenge, finding material. I've mentioned it before. I think I've mentioned it on Octopussy. They asked if we wanted to do it. We said, absolutely, we want to do it. What's available? Oh, nothing. Oh, okay. Well, that's a bit of a challenge. But on Octopussy, I remember telling John Burlingame, who wrote the liner notes, I said, I'm going to find it. Don't worry. I'm going to find Octopussy. And we reached out to various people, and ultimately we did find Octopussy. And I was like, that's great, because I did all the work preparing to have it, so I'm glad that wasn't in vain. It all depends. The thing with the Bond films are, they were distributed by United Artists, and now, that was, now MGM, and so the UA stuff gets passed to MGM, and now MGM's Amazon and all that stuff. But basically, I mean, would you guys consider the Bond films to also be kind of independent films? And like, wasn't that the appeal of having United Artists on board as a distributor, where UA didn't have a studio lot, and UA
UA operate more like a bank
right.
for independent producers, and not just Broccoli and Saltzman. I mean, like the Mirishes, Mirish family, and various others. I mean, that was part of the appeal in the old days.
But the thing is with UA, since they didn't have a lot, a studio lot, a physical place, where does this material go? My friend and colleague did a Fiddler on the Roof album for La La Land a few years ago, and it's like there's just nothing. I mean, he got material, but it wasn't like the scoring masters, and it was it's like sometimes it's tough to find. In the case of Goldfinger, for whatever reason, those recording sessions are missing. We were asked to do the album, and I was like, okay, let's start up this search again. And now, I was pretty certain that there wasn't anything, and we didn't really find anything. But through some miracle, I found the recording sessions for the mono take of the Shirley Bassey song. I was like, oh my gosh, here's the actual takes for that. I remember I was on vacation, and I came home, and my wife had to go out and run some errands. And I was like, oh, the transfers are here. Let me go take a listen. I was like, oh, here's all the takes for the mono version. I didn't intend on waking up. When I woke up that day, it wasn't like, I'm going to recut Goldfinger today. But that's exactly what wound up happening. I just couldn't sit away. It's 3 takes, by the way. The mono vocal is 3 different takes. I think it's takes 10, 12, and 15, and they just cut back and forth between them. So there you go.
On the Goldfinger album that was released, I've listened to it a few times, and the final track it says it's the stereo take. I listened to it; it's very similar to the main title, but there's subtle differences here and there. So was that yet another take?
It's okay. So the film and stereo album are the same take. There was a single, the mono single, and that's the last track on the album.
Okay.
It's Goldfinger mono version. And her vocal, and it's a different vocal performance. Yeah. Unfortunately, we didn't have the stereo performance for her vocal. And here's something, I mean, I know maybe it sounds convoluted. Her vocal performance is different on the mono version. Completely, top to bottom. But the orchestra is the exact same performance. And in fact, you can hear her singing the stereo version in the orchestra backing. It's very faint, but sometimes when she's really belting it out, she cuts through. And we actually worked very hard to remove her vocal so you wouldn't hear it at all, and you just have as clean orchestra as possible with this different performance. And I think it sounds great.
That's interesting. Yeah, no, it does. And it's one of those things where it adds so much value to it, at least for like fans. And I was playing it for my fiance. I'm like, can you believe they have this? And like, look how different it is. And she couldn't tell the difference at all. But
yeah,
for us aficionados who've listened to this.
Listen to the intonation. Yeah. It's different. It's completely different. How do you not hear that? But it was nice to find, like, to have that recording and to rebuild that, which is something that we do a lot, which is, there's a 60-year-old mono master of that version. And it's been on CD, but it doesn't sound very good. We were able to go back to the original recording, recut it precisely, but now digitally, so you don't have these, sometimes you can hear the tape cuts, the physical splices. We don't do that anymore. Obviously, we do it all on the computer, so the edits can be nice and smooth. And it's like, we've polished it up. I wish we could have found the whole score. We would have done that to the whole score, which is what we did, on, Golden Gun or Moonraker or Live and Let Die.
Real quick, the Bond albums, the new Bond albums, come out in limited sets. I believe it's 5,000 each. Now, that's very common because I got some Film Score Monthly things in the 2000s, and they also had limited sets. The number depends on the particular product, but it's been 5,000 pretty consistently for these new Bond albums. What's the reason for that?
I mean, there's a lot of business decisions, especially in today's world, and climate where, people like to do streaming. We hope there are 5,000 collectors who want these. That's really what it comes down to. It's like, are there 5,000 people? At least this is the way I look at it. Are there 5,000 people in the world who want Tomorrow Never Dies on CD? And about that, I guess. I think World Is Not Enough and Die Another Day have sold out, and even that's been after a few years. So it's not since it's not a union thing. A lot of the 3,000 number for like a lot of the films for monthly albums, that was because they were recorded in the United States and there was an agreement with the union that this was an archival album and you can do 3,000 limited, because of the union musicians. That's not the case with the bonds. It's just a matter of getting the license and is there enough demand for that? And so far, that seems to be a decent number.
So we've got, like, how well have they, you mentioned the number, they're almost sold out. Like, do you guys feel like they're being received well? License to Kill is the 8th or the 9th release that we're getting?
It's the 9th.
It's the 9th, okay.
Yeah, you see, I'm freelance. I don't deal with the business end of La La Land Records or any of the labels. I only, what I hear is, yes, they are doing very well. and the Bond fans are very particular and they're happy to go onto the internet and point this out. But yeah, overall, I'd say, yeah, I think the reception's been pretty terrific towards them. I couldn't wait to drop Moonraker onto the world. I had to keep quiet about it for about 8 months.
Wow.
And with Moonraker, the rumor was that the tapes were lost. I don't know if you'd ever heard that or not, but it was a long-standing rumor that the tapes were missing. It was based entirely on a misunderstanding of a comment that was made. The comment was, the Moonraker tapes aren't with the rest of the other tapes at this one particular studio. It never meant that they're missing. It just meant they're not here. But the internet decided to take that comment and turn it into tapes are missing. And they were not, obviously. We didn't even have to do the Octopussy shuffle on that one. It was just, what do you have? Oh, you have this? Great. Wonderful. Let's go. Let's do it.
Well, if I remember correctly, Moonraker the score was recorded in Paris. The movie was primarily based out of Paris in terms of studio shots. Was that a reason why those tapes weren't with the rest of the tapes?
It's probably why they weren't with the rest of the tapes. And when I say the rest of the tapes, it was an archive that had the tapes up to Spy Who Loved Me, I think. And then after that, there were no other tapes. It was just a facility that had them. And this goes back to when Lucas was doing his albums, or was involved with the albums that were issued in 2003. So yeah, Moonraker wasn't there. I said, do you still have that do you still have that list? Let me take a look at it. Because when I was looking for Octopussy and when I looked at the manifest, I was like, yep, they don't have Octopussy there either. So it's like, let's see what we can find. I think that answered the question, didn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
The latest release is License to Kill. It was announced in the middle part of January and started shipping out week of January 21st. In fact, I got an email this week that said mine was awaiting shipping.
Good.
Good. But I wonder if you could give us a little bit of the backstory on that one, because I remember buying it in 1989. It was the first time I couldn't buy a Bond soundtrack on vinyl. I had to settle for a cassette. Yeah, the record store I frequented, they didn't have it in vinyl, so I got it on cassette. And then years later, I got it on CD, but it was just the original release.
Sure, yeah.
Side 1 on the tape was basically the title song and songs that played in the background, and then side 2 was the score, or what parts of the score they had. Looking at the track list on the new release, there's obviously a lot more.
Yeah.
What was going on there?
Well, that was a sort of a transition. It was like the 80s, and what was going on with soundtracks was songs were becoming the thing. Those were the big sellers. You look at like Top Gun or Beverly Hills Cop Flashdance. It was the soundtrack album suddenly was songs from the movie. And really, you look at something even like Back to the Future, which had all these songs and only 2 cuts of Alan Silvestri's score. I think Karate Kid was a similar.
Right smack in the middle of the album.
Right. Yeah. It's just like we have all these songs, but Stand By Me was a popular album. I didn't have any score on it, but it was all the songs from the 50s. It's interesting that you say you couldn't find License to Kill on vinyl because of a few years ago, 12 years ago or so, 13 years ago, I was walking around Venice Beach and there was a table setup guy was selling his wares, and he had these vinyl records that were molded into the shape of bowls. And I was looking and I found License to Kill and I bought it. So I actually have a License to Kill vinyl, but it's molded into the shape of a bowl here. So sadly it's unplayable. So the side 1 of the cassette and vinyl had the 4 songs: License to Kill, Dirty Love, God, what is that wedding song?
Wedding Party,
yeah. And then it also had
Yeah.
Pam. And then Pam is the Michael Kamen. It's a combo of 3 cues. And then we had, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or so cues, suites on the back on side 2. And I don't know the history of the recording sessions. It looks like it was all done at the same time. It's not like something like Thunderball. I don't know if you know the history of Thunderball or even Tomorrow Never Dies, where they had a deadline to get the soundtrack album out. So basically, the Thunderball and Tomorrow Never Dies albums are like the first half of the movie. It's like, here's what we have to make an album. Go ahead. I don't know if that was a similar situation with License to Kill. It doesn't look like that had a long time between the start of scoring and the end of scoring. But for whatever reason, there's no music from, the last third of the movie. From reel 10 forward, there's no music on the original album. So what they did do is they took 14 cues and edited them into 6 suites for the album. So like Pam opens with 9M1. That's the latest cue in the movie, and then it cuts into I don't have the numbers off the top of my head. I just remembered it was 9. I'm pretty sure it was 9M1. Now see someone's on the internet going to go, "Oh, Neil, you made a mistake. It was 9M2. How could you be so foolish to say that?" But I'll be like, I'm pretty sure it was 9M1. And what that means is it was real 9 music 1. If you're wondering what that means. But then you'd have a cue like James and Felix on their way to church, which opens with the gun barrel and the plane landing and James and Felix in the Rolls Royce. But then it will cut to the music for Sanchez escaping, where his truck goes over the bridge and they break him out. And then it would cut back to James and Felix parachuting into outside the wedding. And it's like, that's what makes up, James and Felix on their way to church on the original album. So he made these suites, and they're very exciting suites. Mm-hmm. But for whatever reason, some of the editing, for whatever reason, just sort of the combinations, I don't know what happened when they put this album together on the production side. They weren't the most graceful cuts between cues. I noticed this, when I'm working on these, and I have them in the computer, I can zoom in way in on that waveform, and I can go, whoa, what's going on there? Why is it like just dead silence between these 2 cues? What's going on? Why, so I can sort of smooth that out when I recut. And so on the new album, I did that. I rebuilt the entire License to Kill. I rebuilt all of those suites from our material, and I sort of smoothed over those edits. So it's the same, timings are the same, the lengths are the same, the content's the same. It's just a little more polished, I think, is what it needed for that. I'm very proud of that.
Yeah. Can you expound a bit on the track sequencing for your release? Because I noticed that it's primarily the score in film sequence, but with License to Kill, the theme thrown in. Like the tracks we mentioned, If You Ask Me To, Dirty Love, those are all saved for the secondary CD.
Yeah.
For the album release. Was there a reason why those weren't incorporated into the film order?
Yeah. Part of it is a space reason. It's like, do I need to play Wedding Party twice?
Okay.
Do I need to play, but And in the case of License to Kill, the song, there are two versions of it. There is a short version and there is an extended version. And that was released in '89. There was a single. I have it right here. It's Gladys Knight sings License to Kill. It was a 3-inch CD that had the short version. It had the Michael Kamen Pam suite. And then it had the License to Kill extended version. And the extended version is what opened the soundtrack album. And I thought, okay, well, since I have two License to Kills, I kind of like, if I have the space of, including the original soundtrack album that has value. I did the same thing earlier this year on Last Action Hero, also by Michael Kamen, where we have the score presentation, some additional music, and then the original soundtrack album. And it just, it's like you can get, because we're calling it Music from the Motion Picture Expanded Edition. So it's like, if possible, if there's space and it's not too crazy, let's include the original album, what people heard, what people remember. And it's like, here's one package that has the whole thing. So, but definitely space. I was asked, someone reached out to me. I said, why doesn't the score end with "If You Ask Me To"? I was like, well, what is it? That's like another 4 minutes. That's really pushing it to the edge of what a CD can hold. And it just didn't seem to, it's not by Michael Kamen. If it had been a Michael Kamen song, I'd been like, oh yeah, absolutely. You gotta have that. But it wasn't. I was like, well, it's still on the disc, and so many people, make their own playlist now. It's not difficult to just move "If You Ask Me to after the end of that. But it just made sense, in terms of spacing and including the original album to do it that way.
One thing that's I find interesting, but then I'm pedantic that way, is the different philosophies when these soundtracks were originally issued versus what the audience wants now, which is when the soundtracks were first issued, they weren't in film order. And I think what they were going for was sort of a thematic thing of one track builds upon another on one side, because again, you had to flip the vinyl to listen to the rest. And people who are buying these albums, I think, really want the film order. And then second, there are some little oddities with the originals. La La Land has yet to do Thunderball, and we'll see if it ever happens. But the first time I listened to the Thunderball soundtrack, I went down to my local library, checked it out, and the last track on side 2 is Mr. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, an instrumental. And then later, I bought Thunderball. But anyway, the two Mr. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang instrumentals are different. One sounds as if it were done during the Shirley Bassey recording session, and the other sounds like it was done during the Dionne Warwick recording session.
The 2003 CD that Lucas put out, or Lucas put it out. Lucas was it
Lucas Kendall?
Yeah, Lucas Kendall, who ran Film Score Monthly. He produced, or was an advisor. I don't have the credits in front of me, so forgive me if I get this wrong, Internet. They have both Mr. Kiss Kiss Bang Bangs on there. And the second one is the mono version, which is the alternate. I don't know the history of it. I think that came from a vinyl record, because they couldn't find it anywhere else. It's just one of those little fascinating things. When we did Octopussy, a friend of mine reached out to me and said, "Are you going to include the instrumental?" I was like, "Well, what instrumental?" He's like, "Well, there was a 45 that had an all-time high instrumental, and he had the 45. He gave me the 45. I've listened to it. I put it in my computer, and I was like, yeah, this is a unique recording. It's not on our tapes, but I'm going to have to find it." And luckily, UME had a great tape transfer of it. We included it. When I did, at the same time, I was working on Live and Let Die, and I was going through MGM's archives and found they had the quadraphonic album master. Now, I don't know if you knew this or not. The score to Live and Let Die was issued on LP in stereo, but there was also an 8-track quadrasonic release. It was stereo in the front, stereo in the back. It was It was a 4-channel release.
I had that 8-track, actually.
Yeah. See, now, did you have a player for it? Could you actually play it in quad?
Well, you know what? It was out in the car. I doubt it, but That's where I listened to it.
So I had this transferred, and there were differences. The main difference was the Fillet of Soul track, which had a different performance. So I was like, gotta include that. How did this happen? Why did this happen? But it did. It also had some different editorial changes, but nothing. The only thing that was truly different between that and the standard soundtrack release was this performance by B.J. Arnault of Live and Let Die, and some of the sax performance in the Fillet of Soul track. So we included it. You had to. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
So there are little differences that happen, and I don't know why. Maybe there's just so much material people can't keep track of it. I've certainly lost track of things, I hate to say, but I hope I figured it out at the right time and got them right.
So what Bond album has been the most difficult for you until now?
The most difficult. It's tough to say. There's been a lot of. There's different degrees of difficulty. Now, in the case of, the later scores, the three Arnold scores, they were done at a different point in technology, where John Barry, when he was doing, let's say Moonraker, they would use a complete performance. When you hear, let me just take a look at my Moonraker album for a second here, so I get the title right. When you hear something like South American Boat Chase, that is one performance. They queued it up, they recorded it. Now, they may have done multiple takes. I don't know about that. But the take that was used in the film and on the album and on our CD, it was one take. When you get to something like, Tomorrow Never Dies, World's Not Enough, Die Another Day, digital editing technology has gotten to the point where rather than getting a perfect performance or just getting a full take, they can recut a performance to be absolutely perfect from multiple takes. So then it becomes my job to listen to the film and listen to all of the available takes and reconstruct them. So that, because there's no paperwork that says, oh, we have take 5 for, these 20 bars, and then we cut to take 6 for 2 bars. Then we cut to take 6. There's no paperwork that tells you how to do this. You just have to know how to listen and get things to work right in the computer to figure out where these cuts are. So there are things in Tomorrow Never Dies, like the bike chase.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was 3 or 4 takes. Don't quote me on that. It was just a matter of figuring out where those intercuts are, and that's basically sort of a technology thing. As digital made things easier and quicker, they were able to go ahead and perfect the performances in ways that, in the past, maybe they would sort of let things slide if they weren't too egregious. Sometimes I listen to a recording, I go, oh, how'd they let that through? And I'll just be like, oh yeah, that was the best they had, and they went with it. But now we can really zero in, and just before I started on the Bonds this year, I had I was working on Jurassic Park 3 for La La Land, and I didn't know what to expect on that, and that was like tons of intercuts to try to get the performances correct, and that was a ton of work. So that's a challenge there. Another challenge would be coming up with an enjoyable program for the CD. Now, the way we look at it is we do the score in film order, so we're sort of locked into how we're going to do this. But do I want to put some cues together? If I have to split this on 2 discs, where's a good place to split it? I just don't want it to be arbitrary because the disc is filled up. Do I have something that sounds like a cliffhanger? Something that makes you want to continue listening to disc 2? So there, there's some of the decision making that goes in. Goldfinger was a challenge. We spent a lot of time on Goldfinger actually trying to figure out the best way to present that. Just did I want to do film order? Did I want to do album order? Do I want to do British album order? Do I want to do American album order? So yeah, and that required, apart from this song, absolutely no editing because we only had the album master for it. So they all have different challenges. By the way, Moonraker only has one intercut. It's in the film version of Bond Lured to Pyramid.
Well, one quick aside, one thing you guys were able to do with The World Is Not Enough set, which I was really happy with, was when I was watching in the theater the first time, I really liked how in the end titles they did what amounted to an overture of a sampling of music from throughout the movie. And of course, it wasn't included in the original soundtrack release. And I thought that was really effective. They moved up the James Bond Will Return title card to the very beginning of the overture. And I just thought that was a very satisfying way of doing it. And then this is on a commentary track on the DVD. Apparently, David Arnold again did an overture for Die Another Day, but the director didn't want it. He wanted the alternate title song version with Madonna. So, but yeah, I was just happy that overture saw the light of day with the La La Land release.
Oh yeah, that was on the tapes. So it's absolutely going to get included. I think it's a little different in the film than what was on the tape, but and it's something that was kind of cool. That was the last thing on the tapes, and that mirrored Die Another Day. The unused end title was the very last thing on those tapes as well. You go, well, of course it is. It's the end title. It's like, well, no. These things are not recorded in show order. But in this case, that seems to be the case, that they saved that for the end. Those end title suites. That's another thing about World's Not Enough, and this shows sometimes how, I don't know everything. Also on the tapes were these two great demos of the song World Is Not Enough, and of course the song Only Myself to Blame. And I heard these, I thought, oh my gosh, these are terrific, but who is this singer? So I emailed David Arnold. I said, David, I would love to include these. Do you remember who the singer is? And he goes, yeah, it's me. I go, oh, well, don't I look like an idiot?
That's funny.
Well, we're all very appreciative that you put all those out there, because those are fantastic treasures to listen to.
I'm happy to. Look, I'm a James Bond fan. And so it's like I'm in the unique position of I love this music. I would like to have this music, but I also know how to get it out. Working with La La Land, working with MGM, working with Eon, working with Universal Music, working on the computer, doing the editing, working with the engineers. Mike Matessino mixed Moonraker, Chris Malone mixed Man with the Golden Gun, Doug Schwartz, has mastered all of these albums. He even mastered some of the 2003 albums. I mean, he's been doing this longer than any of us. But so it's just it's a real honor. I'm thrilled that we've been able to do these, and I hope we get to do more.
We're coming up on the 40-minute mark, so and knowing how the internet can pounce on anything Neil says, I'm going to give him a break. But I want to thank you again, Neil, for making time in your schedule, and we look forward to your future endeavors, whatever they may be. Note Internet, I'm not asking him for future projects. I'm just assuming there will be ones in the future. I had a great time. Javi, do you have any final thoughts?
No, I just wanted to express my gratitude once again. I'm a big fan of listening to soundtracks while I read, be it comics or books, and having the Moonraker soundtrack to listen to while I finished reading the adaptation of the movie last month was great. Yesterday I was reading Amazing Spider-Man 13 and 14. I listened to the 3 CD set of the 2002 film score. So it just brings new life to this music that I've listened to over and over throughout the decades, and it revitalizes it. And it's such a great experience. I just want to say thank you for all the work that you've done on all these different projects, not just Bond, but everything else too. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. It's funny you say that because it's like I do the exact same thing. And it's like, did I ever leave high school? Did I? Because like I'm reading Star Trek comics and I'm listening to Danny Elfman's Batman score. I never left high school. I haven't grown up. This is what happens. So it's nice to know that I'm not alone. That there are other people that do this as well. So
yeah, these are great examples of mashups. So reading one thing and listening to music from another.
By the way, speaking of Batman, completely unrelated. If you haven't read Batman Resurrection, the new book that just came out. It's the sequel to the 1989 Batman film. It's a terrific book. I just finished it the other day. Highly recommended.
I'm about halfway through, and I've been listening to the 3LP vinyl that Mondo put out that
There
you
you
had
go.
a hand in. So I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, listen, thanks again to Neil. Thanks, Javi, for joining me. And again, we're starting season 2 of the 007 files, and we hope we can do at least as well as we did in season 1, if not better. This is Bill Koenig of the Spy Command. Thank you again for listening, and take care.